No, I grew up with the Atari 2600. It was the first game system we ever had. I literally remember the time when my dad was going to the store to buy the Atari 2600, and I remember saying to my mom, oh, so we can actually play video games at home? I don't have to put quarters in the machine or anything? Yeah, it was a long time ago. My love for video games came from the arcades, but the Atari 2600 brought home the fact that I could play these at home, and it became my #1 passion. And then, of course, when I upgraded to the NES, my mind was completely blown. But even when I had a Nintendo, I would still go back to the Atari. And although there are a few Atari games that did come out for the NES, there's still a few Atari 2600 games that would have made great NES games, that would have been classics today, I think. How are you feeling? You got John Riggs here, and these are my top 5 Atari games that would have been awesome for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Number 5, we should have had Combat on the NES. I mean, the NES really hyped itself up to be an at-home entertainment system. I mean, that's why it's an NES, Nintendo Entertainment System. They loved their two-player games, the two-player simultaneous games, and no game exemplifies that more than Combat for the Atari 2600. So much so, you can't play Combat one player. Combat is a two-player game. You have to have someone else playing it with you. As you can see in this gameplay footage, where I'm just playing it by myself. How boring is that? But when you have two people playing, it's so awesome. So great. Still is fun today. Combat featured a ton of gameplay elements too. Not just the tanks, or the ricochet bullets, or the invisible tanks. You can shoot, like when you shoot, then you spoil where you are, your location and all that. But also featured like airplanes and jets. So a lot of different gameplay elements here. If you want to put this game along with that Nintendo Satellite or the 4-tap or whatever, now they did make a combat type game in Japan, Battle City. Not exactly the same, but still kind of the same. But it also never came out in the US. So Combat definitely on my list of games that would have been awesome on the NES. Number 4 is Adventure. Adventure is one of my top 5 favorite games of all time. The game's an open world element. You can pick up your items, pick up your sword, for instance, to kill the dragons, which I know look like ducks, but use your imagination, they're dragons. Use the keys to go into castles, which sometimes feature items, and you're trying to reach the goblet or the chalice or whatever it is to bring it back to the yellow castle. That's how you beat the game. Now, although the graphics are super simplistic, this was the Skyrim of our generation. One of the great things about Adventure is there's 3 modes of gameplay. There's the first one, which is the easy one. The second one, a little bit harder, a little bit more open world. There's more stuff happening. But the third one is randomly generated. Well, you see a lot of these streamers playing these randomly generated Zelda games, Metroid games, stuff like that. This game features it as a feature, not even a hack or anything. And yes, we had The Legend of Zelda for the NES, and you can't really top that. However, Adventure has its own charm of its own. I would have loved to have seen the Adventure game ported to the NES with updated graphics or something anyway. If nothing else, just that randomly generated thing, that would have been great. Number 3, let's go to Yar's Revenge. I don't know why I like this game so much, I just do. Now, without reading the manual or anything like that, you're this little like flying bug ship thing, and you have to chip away at the enemy shield, and when you can get to the core of it, then you can launch like this kind of super missile, and when you hit it, then it blows up and you move on to the next stage. Features 2 stages. There's one where the shield is static like this around the ship, and this other one where the shield just kind of like rotates and cycles or something. I thought this was such a fun, cool effect for its time when I first played this game. You get your super missile by either chipping away at some of the shield, or if you just touch the base. You can't shoot at it, but if you just touch it, then you get one, and then you can launch it. You gotta watch out for this little other flying thing too. That just gets in your way all the time. Fun game. Would have loved to have seen this in multiple levels, multiple stages, multiple everythings on the NES. Number 2 is Haunted House. I love this game. So you play a kind of ominous set of eyeballs in this haunted house. The house is completely pitch dark. Well, you don't kind of say completely. You can see the walls, at least in the first stage, but the other stages you can't even see that. And you have to light your torch. You have to light your light. That's where you can find the items. There's 3 pieces that you have to put together to bring back to your kind of home base, and that's how you beat the level. And there's other items that you can find along the way. There might be a key to unlock doors in the later levels. You might find a kind of scepter that will make all the other enemies shy away from you. And there are enemies in this too. Ghosts, spiders, bats. You gotta avoid those guys. If they get you, it's gonna knock you stupid and make you drop all your items. Again, the first level, super simple, gets you in the hang of things, but you have to play the later on levels where the doors lock behind you so you can't just go back through them and stuff like that. You have to go up and down the levels to get to where you need to go. Big fan of Haunted House. Would have loved to have seen what they could have done with a Nintendo version of this. Before I get to my number 1 pick, I wanted to bring on another Atari expert, someone who has a lot of experience not only in YouTube but also in journalism. So here's my friend, Brett Weiss.
Hey, Retro Gamers, Brett Weiss here. Excellent question. What Atari 2600 game would I have liked to have seen brought to the NES more than any other game in the library? Wow, this was a tough question to answer because I'm a huge Atari 2600 fan. There are around 35 to 40 games that I still enjoy playing on the 2600 today, despite all the advances in terms of graphics and sounds and storylines and all that stuff. I still love me some pick up and play 2600. Now, I'm a huge NES fan as well, so I had to really think about this one. But I came up with River Raid. This is the excellent vertical scrolling shooter. You fly up the river of no return in your jet, and you shoot helicopters and boats and other enemies, and you dodge like walls because you have to fly through some narrow areas. You blow up bridges. One of the many cool things about this game is you fly over these little fuel depots, and the slower you fly, the more fuel you get. And you can blow up the fuel depots as well. So a cool strategy is to fly slowly over the fuel depot and then shoot at the last second to blow up the fuel depot to maximize your points. And it's just an amazing game. Now, it's not a bullet hell game because that didn't really exist during the Atari 2600 era, but it is very challenging and a ton of fun that holds up remarkably well. I would love to see this on the NES with maybe better graphics, a little more detail, maybe some weapons upgrades, but to keep that great retro, vintage gameplay, the pick up and play. It would have been cool to see on the NES. I would love that. River Raid for the NES. Imagine it now. If you guys have never played River Raid on the 2600, check it out. It's a great game. Still a ton of fun. And the NES version would be completely off the charts. So that's my pick, River Raid.
Even though I love the other games I have on this list, the game I would love to see the most on the NES of all games would be Dragonfire. First, you have to storm the castle, and you do so, but this dragon's firing these fireballs at you, so you gotta dodge these, either duck under them or jump over them. And then once you're inside the castle, you have to steal all the dragon's treasure. The dragon does not like you stealing its treasure. You stay in the little place, you're fine, but as soon as you get out, he's gonna start launching these fireballs at you that you gotta avoid. Steal the treasure, go through the door, then move on to the next castle. The more castles you go through, the dragon gets harder and harder and harder. And that's what I love about this game. You just keep playing it. Dragonfire, one of my favorite Atari games anyway, but I would have loved to have seen what they could have done with this on the Nintendo Entertainment System. So many underrated Atari 2600 games in this video, and you would be surprised what Nintendo games came out on the Atari 2600. Games like Double Dragon, games like Rampage, and more. Pretty interesting to check out that video too. I did a couple videos like that, so make sure you check those out. We'll see you again real soon.